everyone, and thank you very much for coming out for this really important topic. My name is Suzanne Pichetti-Johnson. I am the Program Manager for Avenues to Wellness, and we are a program of the Frank R. Howard Foundation, so I always thank the foundation for making this speaker series possible. So I am very pleased to introduce our guest speaker tonight, Schuyler Marcier. Schuyler is a community wellness instructor with Redwood Community Services, and for the past 11 years he's been in the behavioral and mental health field there. He teaches this training at a more expanded level, but tonight we're going to get kind of a snapshot, and we're very grateful for him being here tonight.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for that lovely introduction. And a lot of times when we do these trainings, we have a couple hours to do them. We get a chance to meet everybody who's in there, or if we're doing it virtually, people typing in the chat saying hello. Unfortunately, I think with the amount of time we have, I'm going to have to, we just have that introduction. I have a quick kind of icebreaker that maybe that could be our way that we check in with each other before we get into the material. But yes, this is a training from Redwood Community Services, kind of shrunken down into this 45-minute segment. So definitely not a training that's going to cover the entire scope of ADHD, autism, or anything else, but we are going to introduce some strength-based perspectives and just kind of an idea of where you're going with this training. It's a 2.5-hour training when we take it online. So we're going to be talking about neurodivergence, including autism spectrum condition or disorder, ADHD, dyslexia, and then other cognitive psychological differences. Content may touch on mental health challenges, diagnostic experiences, and societal stigma, which could be emotionally triggering and sensitive. So if you do need to take a break, please do. So do what you need to support yourself and engage at your own pace. The first thing I want to talk about is just first 2 or 3 words that come to your mind when you hear the word neurodiversity. School. Different perspective. Temple Grandin. Okay. Patience. Challenges. Yeah. Steering away from the typical. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Do these have any, what are these associations coming from? Are they positive? Are they negative? Are they neutral? I feel like a lot of these that we heard were neutral, which when we do, a training like this, we get a chance to check in and see, how many of us are from a mental health background or have a background where we're dealing in mental or behavioral health. And we may see, maybe that's a good place to start. We want to put a hand up if we've been, had a touch somehow with the mental health or behavioral health fields. Yeah. If we, okay.
Like on a personal level or?
Personal or professional, however. Yeah, so there's probably a lot of experience in the room. So the point of it is that I'm saying there's probably already a lot of, or we're getting neutral and positive answers, is there's probably already a lot of experience in the room with neurodivergence. And has your view of it changed over time? I think we can move forward. Nice little check-in. Thank you for indulging me. So what we're going to talk about during the course of this is we're gaining a foundational knowledge of neurodivergence, these profiles like ADHD, autism, these things that manifest neurologically, behaviorally, and emotionally. So this includes recognizing these co-occurring conditions and understanding the spectrum of neurodivergence beyond diagnostic labels. So it's a chance to challenge the misconceptions like equating neurodivergence with low intelligence or with laziness, and replace that with evidence-based understanding. So this is helping us to reduce stigma, and it's going to foster a more accurate, compassionate clinical assessment and intervention. So we're also going to be identifying and affirming the unique cognitive, emotional, and creative strengths that are present in those with neurodivergence. And these strength-based approaches are going to support the resilience, self-esteem, and therapeutic rapport, and that can guide our treatment planning. So this reframe is going to challenge those behaviors like meltdowns, stimming, and noncompliance, and look at them as adaptive responses to unmet needs, such as sensory overload, and rather than having this as a defiance pathology. So this is a paradigm shift. This is a trauma-informed approach for more supportive care. So we're trying to implement practical evidence-based tools that are supporting emotional regulation, executive functioning, and social emotional learning. So that includes visual supports, scripting, sensory accommodations, and affirming communication strategies. So that's some of the stuff we're going to go over here. This here is pretty small. Actually, it's kind of nice and big up on the screen there. But I'll read through these. This is a cartoon from an Instagram author called Anthony Makes Art. So it says, neurodiversity is the concept that differences in brain development, such as autism, ADHD, are natural differences and should be accepted, like differences in hair texture or eye color. The concept of naturally diverse brains is important to neurodivergent people because not only does it encourage acceptance from other people, but it encourages us to accept ourselves. It helps us to see that even though we are different, there's nothing wrong with us. Neurodivergent is used to describe people who have different or atypical brain development, and while neurotypical is used to describe people who have typical brain development. And so these are different but equally deserving of acceptance and respect. It can also help neurodivergent people get the support that they need in accepting that everyone's brain functions differently, which means that everyone is going to need help in different areas. Conditions that we're going to be talking about today, we're going over ADHD, autism. That is mostly what we're going to focus on. And then we'll kind of touch on some of these other learning disorders, dyscalculia, dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyspraxia, and written expression disorder. Likely won't go very much into that during this 45-minute part, but in the longer training, those are some of the things that get a little bit more attention. So those with neurodivergence, the intelligence is distinct from whether someone has a learning disorder or neurodivergence, not connected. People with learning differences can be and are successful in many careers and personal pursuits. Learning and thinking differences can be invisible to others, hard to spot. They are neurological hardwiring differences. They are not character flaws. And destigmatizing and normalizing neurodiversity is paramount to people's health and happiness. And these learning differences are rooted in neurology, and they are lifelong. So we need accommodations, we need treatment and help. But we're not looking for cures. So this is where we are moving away from the medical model into more of a social model and a cultural model. Okay, let's talk about language and terms briefly here. So I kind of talked about that medical model. We talked about it in some other trainings too, but we're going to look at medical terms versus social or aspirational terms, whether we're calling it a disorder versus a condition. A lot of people with autism don't like it to be called a disorder. They prefer it to be called a condition or a difference, and that's the disability versus difference language as well. So neurodivergent and neurotypical and non-autistic, this can sometimes be called allistic. Then we're looking here at the identity first versus person first. So this is really going to be dependent on the person and who you're talking about. And if you can't ask the person, then you got to ask yourself, why am I talking about this group that I'm not a part of? So with the identity first, it's they're a child with autism, right? But most autistic people don't. They prefer person first would be that a child with autism, but the identity first is autistic. And a lot of autistic people prefer to say I'm autistic rather than I'm a person with autism. But it's going to be different based on who it is. It's individualized. So ask. And the functioning labels, when we say things like that they're high functioning or they're low functioning, those are not helpful. We could say high support or low support. Might be a better way to put it. And yeah, we might be confused about what we're saying. So we can ask, if we're in a medical setting, maybe we're using the more formal language. But if we're in the social setting, it might be more appropriate to use those non-formal ways, non-formal interactions. Okay, so let's talk about ADHD real quick. So this is a neurodevelopmental disorder that impacts parts of the brain that help people plan, focus on, and execute tasks. This is a developmental impairment of the executive functioning. It is not a behavior disorder, it's not a learning disability, and it's not a mental illness. It is one of the most common neurodevelopmental disorders of childhood per the DSM-5, and it is recognized as a lifelong disorder. And there's no single medical, physical, or genetic test for ADHD, but there is a diagnostic evaluation that can be provided by a qualified mental health care professional or physician. They gather information from multiple sources, which could be, they have an ADHD symptom checklist, a behavior rating scale. They also get a detailed history of past and current functioning, and information that's obtained from family members and significant others who know the person well. Some practitioners will do tests of cognitive ability to rule out any possible learning disabilities.
Question.
Yeah.
Is ADHD measured on is it on a spectrum the way autism is?
There's like 3 types of ADHD. There's the ADHD hyperactive disorder, and that the ADHD we're probably most familiar with. There's ADHD inattentive type, and then there's also the mixture where it goes back and forth. And I think most people actually get diagnosed with the mixture. Yeah, so I'll have some diagnosis information on this next slide here. Looking at diagnosis by gender here, girls have ADHD at the same rates as boys, but they are far less likely to be diagnosed. As of the most recent data from 2022, ADHD diagnosis in the United States shows significant gender disparity. 15% of the boys aged 3 to 17 have been diagnosed with ADHD, whereas 8% of the girls in that same age group have been diagnosed. So that means boys are nearly twice as likely as girls to be diagnosed. And experts say that this gap is likely partly due to differences in symptom presentation. So boys are often more externalized in their behaviors and hyperactive, which is more noticeable, while girls may have more of the inattentive symptoms, those can be overlooked. We're looking at some additional insights here. We've got overall diagnosis in the United States, 3 to 17 is at 11.4%, which translates to about 7 million children. And adolescents 12 to 17 have a higher prevalence at 17.9% for boys and 10.4% for girls. And nearly 78% of the children with ADHD have at least one co-occurring condition, such as anxiety, depression, or learning disorders. And now we'll talk about some autism diagnosis statistics. This is a neurodevelopmental disorder impacting the part of the brain that helps people to integrate sensory information, communicate, self-regulate, and more. It's not a behavior disorder, not a learning disability, and not a mental illness. It's another one of the more common neurodevelopmental disorders of childhood per the DSM-5, and is now recognized to be a lifelong disorder. So in the United States, autism is diagnosed through a multi-step process involving developmental screenings, behavioral assessments, standardized criteria from the DSM-5, and key indicators include persistent challenges in social communication and interaction, along with restricted and repetitive behaviors. Diagnosis typically involves specialists such as pediatricians, psychologists, and neurologists who use tools like the ADOS, which is the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule, and the ADIR, which is Autism Diagnostic Interview Review, alongside other interviews and developmental history. And so these can be reliably diagnosed by 18 months. And many children are diagnosed later in childhood or even into adulthood. There's no single medical test, and diagnosis is based on observed behaviors and developmental patterns. And so we're going to look at some of the change over the past years here. So it looks like this is a 2018 and 2017. And then we do have WHO from 2021 there. Some of the prevalence rates in the United States, worldwide, and then in adults. So as of 2025 CDC report, approximately 1 in 31 children, or 3.2%, aged 8 in the United States have been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. And so the trends over time, they have increased significantly. So the trends here are showing that there's higher diagnosis rates among all demographics, likely due to these improved access to diagnostic tools and to diagnostic services in underserved communities. Whereas before there was barriers. And so there's limited national data on the prevalence among adults in the U.S., but there's some studies that show that the diagnoses are increasing due to better awareness and retrospective identification. Like in the U.S., the global data is sparse, but there's awareness of the diagnosis in adulthood, and that is increasing around the world as well. So autism spectrum disorder is over 3 times more common in boys than in girls, and occurs across all racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic groups. I'll see some global prevalence statistics here. It says the World Health Organization is estimating that 1 in 100 children worldwide have autism, but this figure varies significantly across different countries because of differences in diagnostic practices, and differences in healthcare access and reporting standards. So some of the highest rates are Singapore, South Korea, and Japan, and the United States. And some of the lowest rates are Bangladesh and Brazil, but again, reflecting underdiagnostic rather than prevalence rate. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about why some of this might be happening. So synaptic pruning is a process that all of our brains go through. When we're infants, we have many, many times more neurons than we do as adults. So the brain is absorbing information at an astonishing rate, and as we age, the brain is prioritizing what is important and pruning off synapses that it doesn't consider important. So neurodivergent brains are pruning less. So there's more connections in the brain that would have been pruned in a neurotypical brain, but they're still present in the neurodivergent brain. So that we should see as a strength. People can make more connections between things that neurotypical people might not be able to because the wiring is still so interconnected. And this allows for creative thinking, but it can also be disabling. Having so much more connectivity means that there's sensory overload is much more possible than with neurotypical people who may not have all these synapses. Okay, looking at executive functioning here. So these neurodivergent brains, they have a problem with the executive functioning. Often having a problem with things like advanced planning, impulse control, task initiation, working memory, organization, impulse control, and self-monitoring. So people with ADHD might be constantly losing things like their keys, might be messy or disorganized, might make impulse decisions, a lot of impulse buys, maybe have trouble remembering things or focusing on boring tasks, and a lot more. We also see with both that there's the resiliency zone is smaller. So there's big emotions. They're not just happy, they're elated. Or not just sad, they're devastated. Not just mad, they're furious. And not just excited, they're thrilled. We have that emotional dial turned up. So with kids with ADHD and autism, their emotions are the same as neurotypical children, but the dial is turned up. So instead of feeling an 8 out of 10, they're feeling a 12 out of 10. The emotions are bigger, they're harder to control. So it's executive functioning differences in the brain. There's a lower level of inhibitory control that is preventing them from checking those strong emotions before they flood them. So that you can't stop the train once it's started. And the trouble with the working memory is it makes it very hard to have the big picture in mind when you're having those big feelings. They may be struggling to shift their attention, having a tendency to hyperfocus, which can make those strong emotions, make it unable to shift from those emotions to another thought. So kids with autism are often misunderstood. People see a flat affect on their face, but they are in fact experiencing extreme emotions. They just display them differently. So some common traits that we see between both would be strong emotional floods, a strong sense of justice. They feel misunderstood, maybe out of place, and sleeping issues. And then to autism, they may have trouble shifting out of those strong emotions, feeling a sensitivity or a fragility, and they may have existential anxiety or existential dread. And with those with ADHD, they may feel this rejection sensitivity, which is in the longer training, and low frustration tolerance. They feel the happiest when they're stimulated, and they have low self-esteem sometimes, imposter syndrome, and anxiety. I was diagnosed with ADHD, the inattentive disorder, when I was like 8 years old, and was going to be put on Ritalin, and was not put on Ritalin because my mom decided not to. But I have talked to clinicians today who are talking about the drugs are really accurate in what they're doing, and if a doctor is saying like this is going to be helpful for this, this, or this, they probably have a good idea of what they're talking about as far as it comes with the chemistry of ADHD. All right, I'm going to move us into the social traits that we see. So those with autism, they're often finding large groups or highly stimulating environments overwhelming, which can make the social engagement challenging. So their efforts to connect with neurotypical peers are often hindered by these difficulties in initiating and sustaining friendships, in misunderstandings, or intense emotional reactions. And these can lead to frequent peer conflicts. And these behaviors are misinterpreted as controlling or overly demanding, and their reserved demeanor might seem as though they're shy or aloof, but in many cases, they are masking their traits to fit in socially. And despite this internal strain that it causes to them. And then in contrast, those with ADHD, they may be struggling to engage fully in social interactions due to a difficulty to attending to all the aspects of the conversation and the social cues. So like individuals with autism, they may be facing challenges in forming and maintaining friendships, having peer conflicts that are stemming from emotional intensity and miscommunication. However, the key emotional experience that many with ADHD have is a persistent sense of inadequacy or feeling out of place. The behavior might be perceived as inconsiderate or even inattentive, and they may too also be camouflaging those traits to try to fit in. So now we're going to start to try to shift the paradigm. So we can see that we see a lot of ADHD that's been diagnosed in white boys and men until very recently, but just as many women and people of color are neurodivergent. We see on the left, the actor from the movie Atypical depicts autism. Steven Spielberg has dyslexia. Albert Einstein was suspected to have autism. Michael Phelps has ADHD. And then Percy Jackson is a character from movie and novel series who has ADHD and dyslexia. And then on the right, we see Simone Biles, who has ADHD. Hannah Gadsby, who has autism or is autistic. Lisa Ling, who has ADHD and is an award-winning TV journalist. Whoopi Goldberg, ADHD and dyslexia. And then Agatha Christie was suspected autistic, and Greta Thunberg is autistic. Okay, so recognizing and understanding this matters. So misunderstanding the root of someone's behavior as willfulness or disobedience or laziness or other character deficits can cause significant harm. And so neurodivergent people, and even those that receive the diagnosis and treatment early, are at a higher risk than neurotypical people for mental health problems and poor outcomes. So missed diagnosis or misdiagnosis of autism and ADHD can even cause a higher risk for mental health problems and poor self-concept. And boys and men do get misdiagnosis, or they miss the diagnosis as well, but more often women and girls and people of color or those who are not cis or straight are far more likely to be misunderstood and not get the help that they need. But this is also part of trying to reframe the behavior. One of those common conceptions or misconceptions is that when somebody is not able to do something, that they're being willful, they don't want to do it. And then so how do we get them to do it, right? We incentivize them. We try to give them things that are outward, external incentive. And then when they don't do it, we think, well, they must not have wanted it enough. When almost, maybe not all the time, but many times it's because they can't do it. They don't have the skills in that moment to complete the task. So it's can't yet, right? We're gonna develop those skills. We're gonna create that internal motivation to help them decide what they want to do and fulfill their dreams in life. All right, here in the next one, we're going to watch a quick video, and I'm going to give you a little warning for this video. It is a jarring video. This is sensory overload, what it might feel like with a sensory overload. It's a little bit loud. You know, I apologize if it's going to hurt your ears at all. We listened to it before, and it wasn't too loud, but it's meant to be kind of jarring. And it's from an autistic artist. Okay, so now still shifting that perspective. So we just saw the sensory overload there. So the observable trait that we're seeing, crying, refusing, screaming, verbally lashing out, even aggression, the root cause is sensory overload. With the old paradigm is seeing it as a tantrum. They're being oppositional, rude, non-compliant. They've got anger issues. Those were the previous misconceptions. So our new paradigm here is seeing this as a meltdown. They're overwhelmed, they're stressed, so we can provide them with some decompression. Allow them to use some sensory tools. Plan more proactively for the future. Find out what it was that caused it. Here, next one, the stimming. This is a common trait. So moving hands or their body in repeated ways, specific ways, or vocalizing in repeated specific ways. This is stimming. It's the old paradigm was prompting to stop the behavior, emphasizing conformity and emphasizing other people's perceptions. So they would implement behavior modification to stop the behavior and try to replace it with another behavior to make the individual earn time to stim. But our new paradigm is that stimming is regulating. It is a need for the person. Stimming is not hurting anyone, and it's a natural expression. So we should normalize it, we should allow it, and we should affirm it. So this is from steveasbell.com. I think that's the right, it's hard to read his name there. So it says, every day is an obstacle course of loud noises, bright lights, emotion, confusing social situations, and injustice, which I am forever cursed to carry around in a volatile storm cloud above my head. So being chronically overstimulated, misunderstood, and navigating a world that was not built for you can lead to anxiety, depression, and anger. So there's this concept of the double empathy problem. So this is from autistic researcher Damien Milton. So Dr. Damien Milton is a British sociologist and psychologist, speaking of people who are successful and also neurodivergent. He has influential work in autism research, particularly in the double empathy problem, which reframes the communication challenges between autistic and non-autistic people as mutual misunderstandings. And he's a senior lecturer at the University of Kent and a consultant for the National Autistic Society. And he's a leading advocate for participatory and neurodiversity-focused research. And he was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome in adulthood, and he has authored over 250 publications and is a prominent voice in the autism rights movement. And so the purpose here is to counter the commonly held misconception that autistic people lack empathy. Autistic people and other neurodivergent people have very different sets of life experiences, perceptions, emotional experiences, social and communication styles, and ways of experiencing the world and expressing themselves than non-autistic people do. And autistic people may lack social insight into non-autistic culture and communication and experiences. However, non-autistic people lack social insight or empathy into the experiences, culture, and communication of autistic people. So it goes both ways. So Donna Williams said in 1966, or 96, excuse me there, right from the start, from the time someone came up with the word autism, the condition has been judged from the outside, by its appearance and not from the inside, according to how it's experienced. A little bit more on this double empathy problem. So rather than seeing autistic people as socially impaired, the double empathy problem is suggesting that both autistics and non-autistics struggle to understand each other because they perceive and interpret the world in fundamentally different ways. So these differences can lead to misconceptions, misinterpretation, and mutual frustration, not because one group lacks empathy, but because each group has different social and emotional languages. So it's a cultural mismatch. Autistic people often have different norms for eye contact, for tone of voice, for body language, and for conversational pacing. And empathy is contextual. Empathy works best when we share similar experiences or frames of reference. When those differ significantly, empathy becomes hard to enact. So we have some examples here. It's a social interaction at work. Imagine an autistic employee prefers direct, literal communication and avoids small talk. And a non-autistic coworker might interpret that as coldness or rudeness. And so the autistic person might feel overwhelmed by the indirect language and the social chit-chat, and they might interpret that as unnecessary and confusing. And so double empathy inside is saying the autistic person isn't being rude, they're communicating in a way that feels natural and respectful to them. And the non-autistic person isn't being manipulative, they're just following social norms that they've learned. So both are misunderstanding each other due to the different communication styles, not a lack of empathy. And then with emotional expression, a non-autistic parent might expect their autistic child to show excitement with facial expressions or enthusiastic gestures, but the child might express joy through quiet humming or repetitive movement. The parent may feel disconnected, thinking the child's not happy or they're unappreciative. So the double empathy inside is that the child is expressing emotion, just not in the way the parent is used to. And the parent is trying to connect, but may not recognize the child's emotional signals. And both care deeply, but their emotional language differs. So why does this matter? If we understand this double empathy problem, it helps us shift from the narrative of autistic people are lacking empathy to we all need to learn each other's languages. And it's promoting mutual respect, inclusive communication, and better relationships between autistic and non-autistic people. We're shifting to a strength-based approach here. So in traditional clinical settings, autism is often understood through the lens of the DSM-5, which primarily forms it in terms of deficits and impairments. So this diagnostic model is emphasizing behaviors such as abnormal social approach, difficulty with back and forth conversation, and deficits in nonverbal communication. It also highlights challenges in developing, maintaining relationships, a rigid adherence to routines, and intense fixated interests. And these traits are considered problematic primarily when they cause clinically significant impairment in social, occupational, or other areas of functioning. However, if we take a strength-based approach, we're offering a more affirming and holistic view of autism. So rather than focusing on deficits, we're recognizing unique ways that autistic individuals experience and interact with the world. So for example, what the DSM-5 might label as a failure of back and forth conversation, we can also label it as a tendency to speak passionately about topics of deep interest. So often skipping over the small talk in favor of meaningful dialogue. And the differences in nonverbal communication, like stimming or talking, looking away, appearing disinterested. These are not necessarily signs of dysfunction, but they're authentic expressions of engagement and self-regulation. So these behaviors may be misunderstood by neurotypicals, which leads to a social exclusion, but they are valid forms of communication within the autistic experience. And where the DSM-5 is saying inflexibility in routines is a symptom, the strength-based view is saying that routines are providing comfort, they provide predictability in a world that can feel overwhelmingly chaotic due to those sensory sensitivities. And similarly, intense interests are not just fixations, they are often sources of joy, expertise, and deep emotional connection that are fueled by those the hyperconnected nature of the autistic brain. And then finally, the strength-based model is challenging the idea that these traits must be labeled as impairments simply because they make others uncomfortable. The DSM-5 only considers something a problem when it disrupts social or occupational functioning, often ignoring the daily challenges autistic people learn to navigate on their own. So those daily social interactions, working, things like that, that they are learning to do without the support of the society, getting behind and helping and understanding what we're trying to do. So now let's get to part 3, how we're going to help. I've only got a little bit of time left. Kids with ADHD, autism, and learning differences, they need acknowledgement and recognition for the things they're doing well, their strengths, their successes, their gifts, how hard they're working. So you can find those gifts, you can push and nurture the gifts, try to access the child through their strengths, and encourage parents and teachers to do the same. Maybe that the school environments need to change to support different learning styles as well. Reframing. So we're looking at a strength-based perspective here. So ADHD is often misunderstood as a collection of disruptive traits, hyperactivity, distractibility, and impulsivity. But when we view it through a more compassionate, informed lens, we see these same traits can have a vibrant spectrum of strengths. A colorful display of qualities like creativity, empathy, resilience, and spontaneity reminds us that those with ADHD have unique gifts to bring. So rather than focusing solely on deficits, educators, parents, and peers should be encouraged to recognize and nurture those strengths. And to deepen this understanding, a visual representation here, we've got the overlapping Venn diagram showing on one side inattentive traits, daydreaming, low self-control, dislike of routines. And then on the other side, we see hyperactive traits like being energetic, innovative, a natural leader. Sometimes they can be disruptive, but also sometimes they are sparking innovation and spontaneity. So together, these insights can promote a more balanced and empowering view of ADHD. They can highlight the traits that are often seen as problematic that are, in fact, two sides of the same coin. So the capability of harnessing the strengths depends on the context and the support that is provided. Okay, so people with ADHD, autism, and other forms, they have these profound emotional strengths that are deeply woven into how they're experiencing and interacting with the world. They're described as big feelers, not just because their emotions are overwhelming, but because they allow themselves to feel fully and deeply, whether that's joy, heartbreak, injustice, or wonder. And they remind us of the richness and intensity of human emotion. And their sensitivity is not a weakness, it's a superpower. It allows them to pick up subtle emotional cues that others might miss, and many are highly intuitive, able to sense what others are feeling, even when those emotions are unspoken. This emotional radar often translates into deep empathy and a natural inclination to support those who are struggling. They have a heart for the underdog. They often stand up for those who are overlooked or misunderstood. And this is emotional intelligence. They have the ability to understand, manage, and respond to emotions in themselves and others, and it is a core strength. It's enabling them to connect meaningfully with people, build authentic relationships, and foster environments of compassion and understanding. And the capacity to feel the pain of the world is matched by a desire to heal it. They want to make things better and bring light where there is darkness. And in a world that is often valuing emotional restraint, neurodivergent individuals remind us of the power of feeling deeply. And that shows that vulnerability can be a strength. And empathy can be transformative, and the emotional depth is not something to be hidden, but something to be celebrated. So the human paradox. It's the concept of the stimulation baseline here, referring to the level of sensory or cognitive input that a person needs to feel balanced and regulated. So for those with ADHD, the baseline is often lower than what the brain requires to stay focused, so they're seeking extra stimulation through movement, fidgeting, or noise. And these behaviors often help them maintain attention, manage impulsivity, and in contrast with autism, which is either a higher or a lower stimulation baseline, depending on their sensory sensitivities, they may use stimming behaviors like rocking or hand flapping or repeated sounds, and those are often used to manage sensory overload. And ADHD and autism coexist. When they do coexist, the stimulation baseline can fluctuate more dramatically. So stimming may serve multiple functions at once. It may be increasing the stimulation to stay engaged, may also be trying to regulate that emotional state. So understanding these differences can help us to create those more supportive environments and to respect each individual's unique sensory needs and coping strategies. So we can utilize the individualized positive-based reinforcement plans for home and school, provide outlets for hyperactive energy like exercise, sports, socially acceptable fidgets. Those are becoming much more popular. You can use a good behavior book where you just write down the good things the kid did and then you read it aloud to them at night. You could try some audiobooks or some music or meditation for sleep. Get some psychoeducation, explicit emotional self-regulation instructions like stop, think, act, and deep breathing techniques, emotional awareness and mindfulness practice, remembering that all feelings pass, and we're feeling feelings and that they pass. This could be a protective factor against addictive behaviors and numbing emotions. So regular practice of this mindful breathing and relaxation, this can build a child's ability to notice and slow those floods long term and create that emotionally positive culture at home and at school, and have a regular use of language that is communicating that everyone has emotions. Emotions are not necessarily good or bad, and they're not forever. It's not about never feeling sad or angry, but about learning to make helpful choices when you are sad or angry. And that can help your child to learn their strengths, to celebrate them, and to affirm the importance of them. So we can also teach positive self-statements that counteract the negative internalized messages. Be explicit, state them verbally, state them often, have the child repeat them or create their own representations so they become an ingrained script, going from something's wrong with me to I am not broken, or my feelings are too much or I'm crazy to I have strong emotions and it's my gift to be a big feeler, or people only like me because of whatever, I have value the way I am, or I'm too much for others, I can express myself freely, and I'm not good enough, no, I am enough. And one of the most powerful ways to support these children is by investing in their social emotional learning skills. So SEL skills, these are going to help understand and manage emotions, build positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. And these are important for all children, but they're especially critical for neurodivergent kids because of those executive functioning challenges. They're living in a world that was not always designed for their cognitive or sensory needs, and they have heightened sensitivity and emotion regulation difficulties and untapped potential. So we can build these by intentional instruction, consistent, inclusive instruction, have explicit structures, frequent dialogues, regular conversation. You can model and demonstrate empathy, self-regulation, and problem-solving skills. Get into embodied practice. You can try using role play, movement, sensory activities, and repetition. Revisit the concepts to help solidify them and build confidence. By creating these environments that are honoring neurodiversity and actively teaching SEL skills, we're going to empower children with ADHD and autism to thrive socially, emotionally, and academically. We don't want the kids to be pretending to be normal so no one notices. We want them to be fully expressed humans that feel good about their real identity, not ones that feel good about their pretending skills. We want them to feel comfortable unmasking with their safe peer groups. You can check out some good websites. We've got Autism Level Up here. It's a really great resource for anybody who's wanting to learn more about autism. There's also a lot of resources out there that you can check out. There's Free Association, which is a picture book about learning differences. There's some TV shows about ADHD, Twice Exceptional, and autism, and some podcasts, all kinds of different information out there. So neurodiversity, it's not just a conversation topic. We want to help to build a community that is welcoming neurodivergent people into our social circles, our neighborhoods, our gatherings, our workplaces, schools, and playgrounds. It's more than awareness, we're going to acceptance. Awareness means you know it exists. Acceptance means you connect personally, you learn more. You're talking to people, gaining an understanding. We're offering help without judgment. We're embracing, we're growing from it, we're building relationships with people who have it, not just only those that we love that have it. And we're accepting the next step forward, which is building that inclusive community and that community-driven society. So we should be comfortable being different. It's not a bad thing. It means you're brave enough to be yourself. Be that Fruit Loop in a world full of Cheerios. That's all we have today, and this has been with RCS.